This is Masahiro Ito, legendary video game artist and one of the lead monster designers of Silent Hill 1, 2, 3. Among his creations would be Silent Hill 2's Pyramid Head, a hulking yet oppressed creature that has since grown to become an icon not only of the Silent Hill series, but of the entire survival horror genre. So, why seemingly be regretful of such a creation? Now, one would first assume the obvious. But with more context, it becomes more and more clear what the actual sentiment behind his tweet was. Across its 21-year-long history, it has appeared in 5 Silent Hill games, 2 movies, and as the subject of numerous crossovers with varying levels of sensibility, with only its original incarnation being the only appearance that seemed to make any sense. The story of Pyramid Head, in a way, mirrors the story of its franchise, one of decay, of greed, of deformation, and eventually one of death and acceptance. A history of Pyramid Head and the horrors of overexposure. Before discussing the subject of the video, I do want to go back a little bit to the franchise before Pyramid Head's introduction, and provide a little bit of context going into Silent Hill 2, and also that's kind of what video essays do. The year's 1996, and Capcom's Resident Evil is a massive hit. While Resident Evil didn't create the survival horror genre, it did popularize it to such an extent that other gaming companies wanted in. One such company would be Konami, seeking to corner the still competitive American horror market with their own survival horror series. To guarantee their success, they assembled Team Silent, a group of people who had failed at most of their previous endeavors and were planning to leave the company due to their lack of creative control. What resulted was about what you would expect. The team had no clue how to proceed with Konami's demands, and soon Konami higher-ups would lose faith in their Resident Evil clone. As Konami became less and less interested, however, Team Silent would be given more and more creative control over their creation, eventually leading to a concrete idea for the game taking hold, and the game's eventual release in 1998. Konami would not get their Resident Evil. Instead, an accidental masterpiece would be born. While not connected narratively to Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill would lay the groundwork for its eventual second installment and the series as a whole. Its emphasis on grotesque and unfamiliar visuals clashing with small-town Americana, and a departure from the action heroes of previous survival horror titles in favor of an average everyman would become staples of the psychological survival horror series. Silent Hill would follow Dilthary Mason as he travels through the seemingly abandoned small New England town to find his kidnapped adopted daughter Cheryl after a car accident. As he encounters the locals, the occult, Francis Bacon sculptures, and the aliens, it's revealed that his daughter was taken by the local cult called the Order to birth their deity by merging with her sort of sister, sort of mother, Alyssa. Alyssa is the daughter of the suffering spilled into the birth of the cult deity will be a supernatural side who has been barely conquered by Silent Hill's 1998 game. The endings of Silent Hill very much fit in line with the mystic feeling the entire game gives off, with each leaving you with more questions than answers, and some directly contradicting the rest of the game, ensuring the mystery surrounding the small New England town would be preserved going into the second game.
Mary, could you really be in this town?
As stated before, there's very little narratively that connects Silent Hill 1 and 2, with the only reoccurring character between the two games being the town itself. Despite this narrative dissonance, Silent Hill 2 would expand upon the psychological Lovecraftian horror the first game developed to deliver a fitting yet brand new story. This new descent into madness would follow James Sunderland, a 29-year-old widower with an IQ slightly above that of room temperature.
From now on, if anyone makes fun of me, I'll kill him! Just like that.
Eddie, have you gone nuts?
Like Harry, James would be drawn to the abandoned town through mysterious circumstances, receiving an invite from his dead wife Mary, who we are told had died from a fatal illness sometime earlier. From there, we encounter the abandoned town, see the various sites, and discover more and more about Mary's fate. It becomes clear after a while that it was less cut and dry than James had hoped to remember. Either out of pity or selfishness, or likely both, James had killed his wife, smothering her with a pillow as she lay on her deathbed. His journey through Silent Hill, at least in some respects, was meant to allow him to both remember what he had done and be punished for his actions. And what's a punishment without a punisher? Pyramid Head is the main antagonist of Silent Hill 2, acting as the facilitator of the suffering James believes he deserves. James's first encounter with Pyramid Head is during the early game, within an apartment complex where he is seen strolling through the complex and later on wrestling a mannequin. From that point forwards, Pyramid Head can be seen stalking and pursuing James as he works his way through the town. First with his iconic, comically large chef's knife, then with a spear, and also a second Pyramid Head that forms after James kills fellow murderer Eddie Drombowski out of self-defense. Pyramid Head, like the rest of Silent Hill 2, represents James's desire to be punished for his actions, and the representation of his worst impulses. Put it simply, Pyramid Head is, in a sense, James Sunderland, with its actions mirroring James's impulses towards his dying wife. This is further supported by Pyramid Head not only being one of the only clearly male-looking monsters in the game, but also its inclination to kill both of Silent Hill's incarnations of Mary, the grotesque caricatures of her dying state, and his idealistic view of her before her illness in the form of Maria. By the end of the game, James has come to terms with the truth behind his wife's death, and only then is he able to remove himself from his need to be punished, followed by both Pyramid Heads killing themselves, serving as an extremely anticlimactic second-to-last boss of the game. From there, he kills his wife again, either his actual wife or his perfect yet fake image of his wife, and continues on, either giving himself one last punishment, leaving town ready to move beyond his past, or peek behind the curtains to see who's really in charge.
お前の仕業どとなか
Alright, so why did I spend the last however many minutes giving a plot synopsis for the first two games just to talk about one reoccurring monster? Well, mainly to emphasize how tailor-made Pyramid Head is to Silent Hill 2. While both games take place in the same setting, both have entirely different goals, plots, and feelings. Silent Hill constructs its phenomenon around an individual. The first Silent Hill was constructed around Alyssa, and the second was constructed around James, including Pyramid Head. Without James, how could there be a Pyramid Head? In a perfect world, the answer would be simple. There would be no Pyramid Head. There would be no reason for it to exist. Yet, we do not live in a perfect world. For Pyramid Head was destined to become more than just a monster, but an icon. While the relentless pursuer archetype in survival horror is nothing new, Pyramid Head was to many a near-perfect execution of this trope. Its unfamiliar and bizarre appearance, its indomitable aggression, and the constant looming dread that maybe, behind the next long hallway it was waiting, sort of embodied the best moments of the game it stars in, as well as its many themes. The monster itself represents the brutality of human impulse, and its role in the story of the game is to personify the challenge one must overcome to come to terms with it. It's fitting that Pyramid Head cannot die to anything but its own hands. It can be halted, it can be damaged, but it only keeps coming back. Human impulse cannot be stopped, only halted and pushed back. While in Silent Hill 2, the creatures link directly with murder, in reality, the idea this entity embodies can be applied to a number of regretful impulses each and every one of us is guilty of. I doubt many of us have killed our wives, but everyone has acted aggressively and impulsively to our and the people around us' detriment. Everyone has let their worst aspects of themselves bubble to the surface. Everyone has their own pyramid head. Perhaps it's because of this that many resonated with Pyramid Head and what he represents. Or, maybe he just has a cool sword. Who knows? Whatever the case may be, Pyramid Head's popularity would lead it into becoming a poster child for the franchise, with all the drawbacks associated with it. Team Silent would continue their work on Silent Hill for the next two mainline games, Silent Hill 3 and 4, with 3 becoming a fan favorite similar to the previous installment, and 4 being an ambitious yet more mixed final breadth of a prestigious team, a group ready to move on to greener pastures. Forcefully, mind you, Konami was canning them, leaving behind one of the best video game franchises in their wake. Oh, I think I've heard this before. I don't know, it sounds familiar. While other pursuer-type figures, sort of similar to Pyramid Head, would appear in these titles, namely Voltiel and Silent Hill 3, most comparisons between the two sort of end on a surface-level comparison, and are very much their own unique characters, especially compared to later Stalker figures. Team Silent would be disbanded in 2005, apparently because Konami wanted Western developers to develop the series, which, in hindsight, it's such a baffling excuse to can such a talented group of developers, especially considering that, at least for some of these new Western-developed games, Konami would just offload the work onto a woefully unprepared small group of devs to save money. It's fucking crazy, but I digress. During the mid to late 2000s, Silent Hill attempted to escape its video game confines and expand into more mediums, primarily film. Silent Hill, the movie, would be released in 2006, being a very, very loose retelling of the first game's plot, and would be the first time Pyramid Head appeared outside of its initial game. And also, the first time Pyramid Head would be fucking jacked. Jim Bro Pyramid Head is something that I will never be able to wrap my head around. I get it's more intimidating, but at this point it looks like he's going to ask me to spot for him. It's fucking over the top. This isn't just rambling either. Him being this ultra beefed up executioner takes away a lot of Pyramid Head. The creature is constantly in pain, encumbered by its metal frame, just as James is encumbered by his sin. I get why they did it. Masahiro Ito was so good at creating an overcumbered character that when trying to translate it into film, the actor was too overcumbered by the metal frame that they had to change it. But at that point, why not just make a new character? And also, there's lore reasons behind it. Why would he be overcumbered if James isn't there? The comparison doesn't work without him, so why bother? Well, in that case, why put Pyramid in there at all? Why put a character who exists purely as a foil of another character in a story without the aforementioned other character? It's here where the question first comes up, and it's never really answered beyond the very obvious reason it's being done. Because it sells. It would be a while until Pyramid Head would appear in another mainline game, but it did not spend that time dormant, being featured in an arcade shooter with animation straight out of a Xavier Renegade Angel episode.
What was that?
You need to confront pain if you want to transcend the crushing pain of your inner pain.
The next main game following this shakeup would be Silent Hill Origins, a prequel to the first Silent Hill featuring American trucker Travis Grady, as he inadvertently sets the first game's plot into motion while also coming to terms with his mother's violent psychosis and his father's suicide. What makes it relevant to this video, however, comes with this game's own stalker, the Butcher. The Butcher is a hulking, violent, masked figure with an unusually large knife.
Hey, does that sound familiar?
There are differences, for sure. The Butcher seems more calm and comfortable than Pyramid Head, coming across as less burdened. Yet the similarities are large enough that it seems like more than just a coincidence. Hell, both even serve a similar purpose of representing the main character's aggressive impulses. The Butcher would start a bit of a trend of pursuer enemies being revealed to be the main character. Which, was also true of Pyramid Head, but it was a lot more subtle. There was never a scene where the helmet came off and James's face was there or something. Like, oh shit, the real Pyramid Head was me the whole time. Bravo, Team Silent. Had this been the closest the mainline series got to reviving Pyramid Head, I could see all these similarities being like homages to the second game. Yet with Pyramid Head being in Homecoming, it really does feel like the Butcher is simply Pyramid Head's soft reintroduction into the main games, with a functionally identical yet technically different monster simply serving as a means to test the waters. Speaking of which, Silent Hill Homecoming would be released shortly after Origins, and would be Pyramid Head's first and last appearance in a mainline Silent Hill game outside of 2, not counting a cameo appearance in one of the next game's joke endings. This Pyramid Head would be very different from its original incarnation, borrowing elements from Silent Hill films and elements from the main character's military past, including an admittedly pretty badass giant combat knife. While he only appears in cutscenes, it still comes off as odd why James's personal demon would be fucking around with a guy who thinks he's an ex-Special Forces operative. Also, if you're looking for a reason why Pyramid Head is in this game, there really isn't one. He's here as an extension of the Order's influence on the region surrounding Silent Hill, but instead of creating a new monster like in 3, they just went with Pyramid Head. It's not even like Pyramid Head represents anything about the main character either, since the violent action you come to terms with throughout the game was A, an accident, and B, had nothing to do with the occult. If you really wanted to stretch it, you could say that he represents your family's violence and how you were grown to be a sacrifice to the Order. But it still doesn't justify Pyramid Head specifically having anything to do with the main character. The only justification that really holds any water is the fact that Pyramid itself was manifested off of a painting of an old occultist executioner, and Pyramid Head in this game serves as an occultist executioner. So in that way, it does kind of make sense. It still flanderizes the character and doesn't explain why it looks nearly identical to the movie Pyramid Head, or how it connects to the main character, besides the previously mentioned occult angle. But if that's enough for you, by all means take it. Just to me, it feels like Konami or the dev team working on this game, or both, wanted Pyramid Head in first and cobbled together an explanation later. It's also around this time where Pyramid Head began to be featured in less than fitting crossover material, being a playable character in the game New International Track and Field. Its final appearance in a Silent Hill game would be Silent Hill Book of Memories in 2012, an odd Diablo-style dungeon crawler as an enemy. It's also in 2012 where the final Silent Hill game, as of recording this video, was released, Silent Hill Downpour, featuring the Boogeyman. But not the previous one, a new one. Basically, all the complaints I have for the Butcher can be applied here. It's a pursuer that serves kind of the same purpose as Pyramid Head, except focused more around how violence begets violence and an endless cycle of revenge and whatnot.
Take that, damn it!
Because it tackles the anti-violent message from a completely new perspective, it's a whole lot more forgivable, plus its appearance isn't a knockoff of Pyramid Head, or literally just Pyramid Head, so that's a plus. It's a little bland and forgettable, but at least it's unique. But at the end of the day, it's still a reoccurring pursuer that is an extension of the main character's violent impulses. Outside of its franchise, its most recent appearances have been in crossover material, being a playable character in Super Bomberman R and Dead by Daylight, where it finally remains today. So who cares? Why is it such a big deal that Pyramid Head appears in more than just Silent Hill 2? At the end of the day, the game is unchanging. Pyramid Head is still there. Just because we now have the Executioner, and the Pyramid Bomber, and the Boogeyman, and whatever the hell this is, it doesn't change what made it so special in the first place. Why care about cameos, fan service, and the general overuse of Pyramid Head? The media is unchanging, so why should our perception change? Well, try as we might, no one can view media in a vacuum. While Silent Hill 2 is the same as it was 21 years ago, we aren't. Our perception changes because the context of our view changes. Sure, I don't think anyone will look at Silent Hill 2's Pyramid Head and think, oh shit, that's the driver in Konami Crazy Racers. But these extraneous cameos, crossovers, and appearances definitely in some way cheapen the effect Pyramid Head has, or rather had. The dark is only scary because it represents the unknown, what could be lurking in the shadows, and it's only when you shine a light on the chair in your room that looks suspiciously like a figure where the fear dissipates. Pyramid Head has had a light shown on it in every single installment he's appeared in outside of Silent Hill 2, and that fear has begun to fade. What is Pyramid Head without James? Well, as of now, it is a mascot. And like every good mascot, it is cursed to outlive its own media, representing an era itself has left behind and will never fit into it quite right again. While I don't necessarily believe any appearance has ruined Pyramid Head, or that no one will ever be frightened or unsettled by him again, I do believe that it will never really hit as hard as it did back in 2001, and its overuse is at least partially to blame. 1999 would see Capcom wrap up their first 3 Resident Evil games with Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, featuring Resident Evil 1's protagonist Jill Valentine as she makes her way through the doomed Raccoon City. Hot on her trail would be the game's namesake, the Nemesis, a giant biological weapon dead set on taking out each and every STARS operative one by one. The Nemesis would remain Jill's adversary for the entire game, only ending after an extravagant execution featuring a handful of lasers and a railgun. Within the Nemesis would be every trait of the game it stars in: relentless aggression, chaos, and a shit ton of bombast. Despite having no vocal lines or even any real connection to the main character, it is inseparable from its game. It is Resident Evil 3. Since its release, it has made a number of other appearances, including a number of crossovers, a few spin-offs set during the events of Resident Evil 3, and the Resident Evil 3 remake, along with an appearance in the film Resident Evil Apocalypse. While certainly used a lot, each appearance makes sense. Each takes place during and expands upon the third game. There's a reason for it to be there beyond wanting to use the Nemesis again. Because of this, the character's original intention has been preserved in a way that other survival horror icons haven't. Sure, there's a number of pretty absurd crossovers, but at least within the main franchise, the Nemesis of 1999 is still very much the Nemesis of 2022. I'm aware that the Resident Evil Silent Hill comparison is extremely overdone, especially for 2 completely different franchises, but humor me for a second here. I believe the Nemesis shows something that is often pretty rare to see. Nemesis shows the alternate path Pyramid Head could have and didn't go down. Both are personifications of their game's plots, themes, and goals. Both are tailor-made for the setting and the context their games are in. Both are iconic antagonists of 2 revolutionary survival horror franchises. And yet one was taken out of the only setting it made sense to be bastardized over the course of 21 years. And one has remained within its bubble. arguably still overused, but at least consistent throughout its history. I believe this was Pyramid Head's best case scenario. Had Konami been more thoughtful, more careful with their use of the character, perhaps this could have been the route Pyramid Head took. Perhaps its creator wouldn't be taking to Twitter to complain about its overuse. Perhaps I wouldn't be making this horrible 26-minute rant about a fictional monster. Sadly, however, the time to correct course is long gone. The damage has been done, and all that's left to do is to make sense of what's left. In all honesty, it's difficult to write a satisfying conclusion to this way too long clusterfuck, because the story I've covered has no real satisfying conclusion. Silent Hill as a franchise has been largely dormant since 2012, with its body occasionally being puppeted to reveal a game that will never be released, or a new skateboard, or a fucking pachinko machine. Pyramid Head, likewise, is also dead, which it probably should have been for a long time. Occasionally a new leak will come out, get the hopes of the community up, and either be revealed to be a hoax or Konami being Konami. Considering its treatment of other beloved franchises, I personally have little hope for a revival, let alone a revival that in any way warranted a decade of dormancy. Going back to the tweet that started this entire video, I feel like I was wrong to assume that there was regret behind it. It's clear that Ito cares for his creation, and I don't think anyone would make their profile picture a creation they were not proud of. In my opinion, this tweet is not really one of regret, but one of exhaustion. Masahiro Ito is exhausted from his creation being used in roles it was never really meant to fill. Honestly, I feel like exhaustion is the best way to describe Silent Hill's long and, at times, tumultuous history. Team Silent was exhausted with Konami's micromanaging, and only really shined when they were relieved of said micromanagement. Eventually, Konami would grow exhausted of Team Silent's direction of the series, and eventually remove them from the company. And post Team Silent's removal, the franchise grew exhausted trying to recapture the magic of the first 4 games instead of really trying to create something new. Perhaps a long sleep is what everyone needs, the fans, the devs, and the series. Maybe a decade is what Silent Hill needs to be rejuvenated and to finally move beyond its obsession with the past.